Welcome to today's webinar, Illuminating Microsoft 365. We are going to begin exploring the possibilities with Planner. And if you haven't realized yet, today is May the 5th. Revenge of the 5th is upon us. Richard
Right.
and I have prepared accordingly. So again, we're both Star Wars fans, so we're totally eating it up. We love it. But welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Joy Apple. I am the Joy of SharePoint, and I am here with my work twin, Richard Calderon. We are both modern workplace strategists at Pate Group. I've been in this game for about 12 years now. My primary responsibility, other than getting to do fun stuff like this, is helping organizations and departments figure out how to get from where they are today with older technology such as file shares or even older versions of SharePoint and bringing them into Microsoft 365, SharePoint Online, Teams, OneDrive, and all the apps that go along with that. I can't imagine a better job in the world. I love it. Richard, how is your Revenge of the 5th going?
Having a great day so far. Thanks, Joy. So good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you joining the webinar today. If I just said ditto on everything that Joy just said about herself, would that pretty much cover it?
I think it might. It might.
Yeah, we are role twins here at Pay Group, both modern workplace strategists, and we just love doing what we do. You know, we do all things related to Microsoft 365. Really focusing in on what are the business drivers and ultimately what is the business outcome that you're trying to achieve through these new, very modern ways of working in the cloud and mobile, et cetera. And so that, at least in part, is why we wanted to bring these various series of webinars to you. We just completed our first season of webinars recently, where we focused entirely on kind of the ins and outs and even some of the parameters of Microsoft Teams specifically. And then now we're starting episode 1 of the Illuminating Microsoft 365 series today, really kind of branching off into just the broader extended set of services and applications in the Microsoft 365 platform. So we wanted to start off talking about tasks and task management and specifically targeting in on Microsoft Planner. So again, thanks for all of you joining today. Kind of how we normally start off these is we do want to do a little bit of a poll. It just helps us get a little bit of better understanding about you, who's in the room, some things about your experience in working with some of the topics that we're going to be talking about. So we have just a couple of really quick questions that are up in a Microsoft Forms form. You can get to the link that's either in the Q&A window. I'll go ahead and pop up here on the screen the QR code as well too. So if you happen to have your mobile device handy, you can turn on the camera and just scan this QR code. It'll just take you directly to this form in a web browser on your device where you can fill it out. But you know, we just want to know a couple of things. Who's in the audience today? The second question is really kind of focused around the topic at hand, which is what tools, if any, do you currently use to keep track of tasks and activities within your team? So again, feel free to check any and all of those that apply. And then for those of you that kind of tend to follow what's going on in entertainment news, just kind of interested to know, you know, what do you think about Nicolas Cage, Joy, playing Joe Exotic in this upcoming Tiger King series? You know, I think there's probably some, yeah.
I think he was born to play that role.
He's pretty weird.
Do.
Yeah, he's pretty weird. So he might
memes.
just knock it out of the park, you know.
Oh, I think he will. I
Yeah,
think the memes alone are going to carry it.
sure, yeah. So let's see. Again, thanks for everyone just kind of jumping into the poll and answering. Looks like we've got a few responses at this point now. So again, thanks for letting us know who's in the room. Happy to see that we've got some folks from the line of business areas within your company. So thanks for joining us. Got an executive here on the line as well too. Welcome. And then in terms of tools, you know, not surprising. It's great to see we've got a number of folks that are already leveraging Planner, but you know, currently not having a good approach for keeping track of tasks. Thanks for that fair and transparent answer there. But you know, also not surprised to see email and calendar, quite frankly, used quite a bit. using documents or note taking. OneNote is pretty common for being able to keep track of a list of tasks, etc. One I left off the list is, maybe you used SharePoint tasks lists in the past before. Left that off the list, but glad to see these responses here too. And then how funny this is, like an even almost like Microsoft,
I love it.
It's just very well done. Even Steven here, with a couple of folks that just maybe don't know what we're talking about, and that's fine. We're like I said, Joy said, we're kind of nerds in this.
Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. I watched one episode.
Yes.
I watched the first episode of it, and I thought, I can't risk losing the IQ points, so I just kind of backed away.
Exactly.
It scared me.
We'll see, though. I think it's going to be fun. So, okay. So moving along with the topic at hand today. So, again, in the spirit of being Revenge of the Fifth, Darth Vader himself would certainly say, "What are the plans? Where are the plans for the Death Star?" I guess, if you will, right? Originally. And of course, not having a plan or a lack of planning certainly can be a big challenge for lots of teams and groups that are effectively just trying to move a project along, whether it be an ad hoc project or a long-standing project of some sorts. There are a number of different ways that you can use online tools, Planner being one of them. But we really wanted to kind of focus in on that specifically today, because again, we think that it's pretty cool. And there's lots of really great capabilities you can benefit out of it. This is all kind of Microsoft slideware here, but just to kind of give you the general sense that the way that Microsoft has built these tools over time, which many of you probably have experienced, is there are a number of them that are really across the Microsoft 365 ecosystem at this point now. And it can be a little bit of a maze, if you will, to kind of figure out, well, which ones work with what and so forth. And in the end of the day, really, as Microsoft tries to put it, tasks are really about people and trying to empower people to effectively be able to get things done and address those needs and keep track of what you're trying to get accomplished. So at the bottom of the screen there, you can see what they refer to as their hero task management endpoints are two different services in Microsoft 365. One that's called Microsoft To Do, which coincidentally, we're going to do a webinar on that next week at the same time as well. So stay tuned. If you have not had a chance to register for that, please do. We're going to focus in on more personal task management with Microsoft To Do. But then the second hero task management planning app is the one that's called Planner. And again, we're going to drill further and further into that here today. But for those of you that maybe aren't quite familiar with what Planner is, Planner is, you can think of it as Microsoft's stopgap, if you will, or the way to solve the problem between that, again, that real sort of basic personal task management, where it's just my tasks and I'm just trying to keep track of myself from a personal productivity perspective, versus the really kind of full-blown project management where you're leveraging tools like Microsoft Project or even Project Align. It's got Gantt charts and resource leveling and dependencies and all these types of things, which are all great for project managers. But sometimes maybe it's just a bit overkill for a team that's really just trying to say, okay, these are the half a dozen things that need to get done this week, who's doing what, and what's the progress, etc. So Planner is Microsoft's solution to solve that in between those two. And it really is. It's a very simple utility. It's all online. Again, this was born in the cloud. There never was sort of an on-premises version of Planner before. It's very visual. Again, it allows for a really simplistic way, even in a regular, let's say, kind of a weekly stand-up meeting that you might have with your team, to quickly get a sense of what's going on in terms of status, in terms of progress, if you need to make adjustments, et cetera. So again, for those of you that aren't familiar, we're going to drill a little bit further into this here today. We're going to demonstrate quite a bit. And of course, what discussion around some of these services in Microsoft 365 would be complete if we didn't talk about the fact that everything really in some way, shape, or form can get pulled into Microsoft Teams as the hub for teamwork, which you've heard us talk quite a bit now over the past few weeks. And of course, Planner and tasks in general is no exception to that. So actually what you're seeing here on this screen is a little bit of a sneak peek screenshot, a little active running screenshot here of the soon to be released to the public kind of overarching tasks application inside of Teams. You can see right here on this screenshot here that there's a tasks app that's pinned to the left navigation rail in Teams. So not there yet. It's on the roadmap, but when it does release, it's actually going to bring together this aggregate of personal tasks from Microsoft To Do and tasks in Planner, with an expectation that in the future it's going to just extend to any and all tasks that are really across the Microsoft ecosystem. So pretty exciting stuff.
And I have food for thought on that.
Yeah.
Notice, and this is not a bad thing, this is not at all criticism, but Microsoft does like to put options out there and see, and I'm impressed with the process most of the time to see where people go, what they like, what's working, and then to find a way to make it better. Once they kind of see where people want to go, and they are seeing people flock to Planner. I mean, I would say that's probably, you know, you get your default tabs in Teams, you get your posts, your files, your wiki. That's probably the #1 app that gets added next to all that is the tab for Planner. In Planner, tasks pull in automatically, if you haven't ever noticed this, into your to-do. So there was starting to be a merging of those task apps for us. Your Outlook tasks go into to-do as well. So if I, as an individual, want to jump in and be productive and look at my task list, it's all right there. Well, now we see them going, okay, Teams is the tool where people want all these things to ultimately come. Richard, agree or disagree? Teams is probably the tool we live in the most.
Agreed, entirely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
It wasn't always that way. Yeah.
But this tab coming is just going to make that productivity so much better, much more streamlined. I'm really looking forward to it.
Definitely looking forward to it. So again, we will certainly keep our ear out when we hear that it's coming out, and when we see it show up in our own tenant, we'll be one of the first, if at all, to blast that out in social media. So certainly pay attention to any of the channels where we're putting that news out there. But what I wanted to focus on today again is really what's in the platform today, how great these tools are, and how transformative they can be for helping you and a group of people in a team really be able to, again, alleviate one of those major pain points, which is just simply centered around keeping track of who's doing what. So for those of you, I've got a little demonstration environment going here. For those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with this, you know, if you open up a web browser, if you have Microsoft 365 and you open up a web browser and you just simply go to office.com, chances are that you will get logged in directly to this page. And if not, you might just have to click a button that says sign in. But what it's going to do is it's going to sign you in using your work credentials, your Office 365 account. And it's going to take you to a landing page that looks something like this. So this is what is referred to as the Office 365 homepage. If you haven't seen this before, I would encourage you to give it a shot and see what some of the benefits are. But in this landing page in a browser, as you can see across the top here, there's a whole series of applications, all Microsoft 365 apps, inclusive of Dynamics 365 in this demo. But depending on what licensing you have, you may see different apps, you may see fewer, you certainly may not see some of them like admin, etc. But this demo user kind of has the rights to everything in the kingdom here. But clearly, again, you'll notice that one of the apps here in the list is Planner. You know, from this, you can also click on the app launcher here in the upper left corner. You'll also see that Planner's in this list here as well. If you go to all apps, you know, you'll see this alphabetized list and kind of remind yourself here what starts with a P, there's Planner. So a couple of different ways to get to what's called the Planner Hub. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on that and just sort of give you a sense of what this looks like here. So again, Planner is all entirely, it's a cloud-driven service, which is emphasized by the fact that you can get to it here from a web browser, in this case. We mentioned before that you can get through it from Microsoft Teams. We're going to kind of pivot and talk a little bit about that as well too. And as you might expect, you can also get to this service from your mobile device because there is a Planner app amongst many other mobile apps for the major mobile platforms such as iOS and Android. So we'll also take a look at some of that as well too. But here what you're looking at is what they refer to as the Planner Hub. And the Planner Hub is basically a dashboard view of, in this case, this user, Megan Bowen's, list of projects, list of planner plans, I should say, that she is either a member of or has access to, and is able to see sort of in a single glance here across this portfolio of planner plans what's the current status. And so in this case here, she's even marked some of these as favorites in this case, so that they show up here directly on this hub. But you can see here, some of the really obvious things that are just useful right off the bat is that across these various different planner plans, you can see the number of tasks that are currently left. The color, depending on whether or not you see color well, I don't see color really well, quite honestly, is different depending on whether it's blue or green or red for in-progress tasks or late tasks or tasks that are completed, et cetera, et cetera. But again, this is a really useful view so that you can come in here and just get a kind of a quick glance as to what's going on across these various plans. When you click into any of them, so I'm going to click into this one here that's called a product launch event, it takes you directly to that particular plan on what's called a planner board. So when you create planner plans, you're effectively creating this board. The board, it consists of a series of what are called buckets. These buckets are these vertical columns that are going vertically, in this case here. And the buckets can really be kind of anything that you define, anything that makes sense for you for this particular plan. So in this case, for this product launch event, they had these 3 buckets trying to identify primarily, are the tasks on track? Are they blocked for whatever reason? Or are they potentially at risk of delayed or being blocked? And then they just left a default bucket here called to do, which are basically tasks that just haven't been categorized just yet. So if you're creating new tasks in this particular plan, they might be adding them into this to-do bucket at first, and then further categorizing them as the project in this case goes further on. But again, you have these buckets. The buckets are just going to go from left to right across the screen, and so you can add new buckets as you like as you go here. Continue to add new buckets and just kind of give it a name if you want, and so on and so forth. And again, you can just keep adding buckets, and the page is just going to continue to scroll in that direction there. There is some limit to the number of buckets. I don't know that off the top of my head, in case you're all asking, but we certainly can look into that. So I think that maybe even have changed at some point in the past. But again, you can create buckets. Within these buckets, you can get down to the actual tasks themselves. So that's what these tasks cards are. When you just want to add a new task, it's as simple as coming up to the top of any one of these buckets here and then just clicking on Add Task. When you click on Add Task, scroll back over here again. When you click on Add Task, it gives you 3 basic things that it wants to know just to get the task started, essentially. So, we need to review, maybe they need to review the venue setup or something like that. You give the task a name. You can set a due date, which again is pretty typical for most teams that are trying to track task activities. When is this task due? Well, this one is due by Thursday in this case. And then of course, do or I do not want to assign it to people? In most cases, absolutely. I want to assign it to others. So I'm going to assign it to a teammate here, Lydia Holloway in this case. And so that's basically it. The 3 core things to create a task. And then you just hit Add Task here at the bottom, and that's it. And that task got created. Now, if you wanted to then be able to see some additional detail or add some additional detail to the task, it's as simple as clicking right here on the task card itself, and it pops open this additional dialog, which gives you more information about the task itself. So again, as you can see here, this is where you can see to whom it's assigned. You can certainly add more than one person as assigned to a task if that's suitable for the particular task you're creating. You can change the bucket in this case. So again, this is the list of all the buckets, inclusive of that one that I just created called New Bucket. You can change the progress. These are the only progress indicators by default in the service at the moment. I know that there's at least 1 or more user voice requests about being able to customize some of this data, so being able to put custom progress indicators in here. But again, to my understanding at the moment, these are the default ones that are the only options from which you can choose. So you can say it's not started, or it's in progress, or it in fact has been completed. You can also change the priority. This is something that has evolved in the service, because early on, this was not something that was available, but it is now. So you can set priority against tasks. You can also set a start date. So again, if the task needs to be completed over a certain length of time, you would say it starts on this day. So maybe it does need to start today, but in fact it is due by Thursday. So you can set that. You can add notes. You can kind of drag this little indicator here, or drag that little icon right there to make this a little bit bigger, to put some more notes and more descriptions. You can add what's called a checklist in Planner. A checklist you can really just think of as subtasks. So, think of it as like these 3 things need to get done as subtasks before the bigger task itself can actually be completed. So I've got to get this one, this one, this one, so you can keep track of it this way. You can, over here, you see how not only I can delete one of these subtasks, but I can also very easily take a task, for example. Thank you, Lydia, who is Joy in this case, for adding in some additional checklist items. But you could take something like a checklist item, by the way, and in one click, you can actually elevate that from a checklist subtask into its own task if it needed to be assigned to someone else, or it needed to be prioritized in a different way or set with a different due date. So you can see when you hover right over here, there's this little option that says make this a new task. So when I click on that, it's just going to effectively, you have to see it kind of popped up over out here. I'll show you that here in a second, but it basically just took that item away from a checklist and promoted it to a full task. So that's pretty useful. You can also add attachments. Attachments can be files that you just add directly here in this case into the task itself. You can also do links and links to SharePoint. So that's also extremely useful, clearly, how we're putting all of our content in the cloud.
Can I interrupt you with an opinion real quick?
Sure, go right ahead.
When you're adding an attachment, if that item already lives somewhere where your team can get to it, please, 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 please use that SharePoint button. If it's in a SharePoint document library, that also applies to your Files tab in a team, because that's Absolutely. In SharePoint. And we know they know that because they were on the webinar when we talked about SharePoint and Teams. If you weren't, you can go back and watch the recording. But if that item already exists somewhere where you can link to it, don't attach it separately, because now you're duplicating your data.
Precisely. Yep. Great point. So thanks for weighing in on that. And so for those that maybe weren't following along, if you click on add attachment, and it gives you a couple of different options of things to do. Again, file is just going to say, do I want to upload a file from my PC, desktop, or what have you, and let me upload it directly in attaching to the task. You also have an option just to put a link directly to an item. Or you also have this option to do SharePoint. So when I click on SharePoint, in this case, this is going to give me the option of being able to select a file that sits within the context of where this particular plan, where it resides. And I'm going to kind of put a pin in that one for a second here, because I want to make sure that we kind of come back and talk about where Microsoft 365 Groups fits into this whole picture around Planner and Teams and SharePoint, et cetera, et cetera. So just know that if you do SharePoint, you'll get a few options of things that you can pull here from. But let's say, for example, I want to just have this PowerPoint. I can hit save. It will actually attach that here. Notice I've got this little option that says show on card. I don't know if you were noticing back here behind the scenes, but if I say show on card or uncheck show on card, it sort of hides that. But you can also say show on card. I think that's pretty useful, actually. Again,
Absolutely.
Given that this is a very visual tool. And then, of course, you can select this here and either edit the path or remove that entirely. And then lastly, finally, at the very bottom of this tasks card, you also have the option to be able to add in comments here. And these will be ongoing comments here that effectively allow your team to be able to have a running dialogue about the tasks themselves. So down at a tasks level, you can keep track of what's going on from a comments perspective. And depending on how you have things configured, your team members can get email notifications, et cetera, about tasks, about comments in tasks, so they can then know that somebody commented and come back in again. Okay?
And I think it's worth...
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I saw that a question came in a minute ago about the notifications. So notifications at the moment do all go to email. And that's if you're assigned a task or if you have a task that's running late. Comments, those do go to Outlook as well. I do wish there was a way to loop those into our Teams conversations. I think that would be super cool.
Actually, there is a way to do that now, and I have at least to some extent, had success with seeing it work. I don't have it wired up in this demo at the moment, but I'll show it to you here that if you're in the Planner Hub, and again, this is on a user by user basis, but if you're in the Planner Hub and you come way up here to the settings option for Planner, you can choose notifications here. And you'll notice that in notifications, there's one option that says when someone assigns a task to me. So if Joy, in this case, assigns a task to me, as she mentioned, for the longest time, the core notification has been that I get an email that says, Joy assigned me a task, click here to go to it. Or if I have the mobile app for Planner on my device and I have the notification set up there, it would send a push notification that says Joy has assigned a task to me. But you'll notice that, and I'll have to look on the roadmap as to when they kind of wedged this in, but they did wedge in the ability for teams to be able to also have that notification, which effectively shows it in the activity feed, so that you can then be able to get notified inside of Teams that a task has been assigned to you. That's at present the limit of what you actually will get in terms of Teams notifications. Again, per my understanding and paying attention to the roadmap, they're going to further integrate and further embed the ability to leverage Teams for ongoing interactivity and communications when it comes to Planner tasks, any of the tasks for that matter. Because again, it just makes sense to do. Yeah,
it does.
Yeah. So anyhow, just a reminder, if you want to be able to do that, again, you've got to set that yourself. You go into the Planner Hub. It's the only place you can find it. You click on this settings option, you go under notifications, and if it's not already set for you, you would check this box that says, when someone assigns a task to me, please let Planner notify me. And Teams will also be in that mix.
Looks like comments were still relegated to Outlook, but that's okay. We can make that work, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think too, again, I think that the vision is certainly to give the opportunity to tie that more into conversations, comments that are wrapped around the task inside of Teams versus having to bounce out to email and so forth to kind of manage and be able to get notifications on that. But again, we'll go back and look through the roadmap for Planner, or you could look at the roadmap yourself too. It's all the public-facing roadmap for Microsoft 365, and see what they're saying.
What about having multiple boards?
Multiple boards. So you absolutely can have multiple boards. Let me give you an example here. I mentioned earlier, and there were some other things I certainly wanted to show you in the Planner Hub. But some things I wanted to kind of just give you a visual here about how this also works in the context of Microsoft Teams. So again, I'm in Teams, logged in as this user Megan in this case. And there's a couple of different ways that I can get back and forth from Planner activity in this case. First and foremost, maybe the easiest way that I have found is that you can, again, this is on a user by user basis, you can install the Planner app into Teams for you, which then gives you the ability, if you so choose to do so, is you can actually pin it here. So by default, it doesn't pin, but if you install the Planner app, you can certainly choose to pin it here where it pins it to the left rail. And then when you select this, again, this is a continually evolving thing for Microsoft. So some stuff is working the way you might think it would work today. Some stuff is actually no longer even there at the moment. But what you'll see here is a similar set of views that you would see in the Planner Hub on the browser. This first tabbed view is your tasks. So these are tasks that belong to you in terms of they were assigned to you or you assigned yourself to them across a number of different plans. So again, this is grouped by progress, but you can come over here and change this grouping to say, I want this to be grouped by plan. And when I do that now, I can very clearly see that these are tasks assigned to me across 4 different plans in Planner. Okay, so you have the ability clearly to have multiple plans to which you're assigned. But then in terms of how would I then be able to understand where in Teams, either a Teams owner or some member who had the ability to add tabs, where do they actually pin them and so forth so that I can quickly navigate my way back and forth to them. You have an option up here at the top that says all, this tab. So when you click on all, this is a Teams specific view of these Planner boards. In this case, it's going to tell you, personally would kind of rather the tab name kind of jumped out first. But anyway, it shows you which teams these plans are associated with in this case. So again, remember, every single one of these teams is effectively a separate Microsoft 365 group that has been created. But then within each of these teams, across these various channels, these tabs are actually, as Joy was mentioning earlier in the webinar, these are planner boards that have been pinned as a tab inside of these channels, so that again, from this view, you can very easily see, okay, there are 3 separate planner tabs all in this channel, and then various other planner tabs across these other teams, etc. So it's very easy to be able to click your way through that. If I just click and select this here now, it'll just bounce me straight over to that channel in that team and immediately to that planner tab, which again really is just an entire view of that planner board here inside of Teams. Okay, so I know that was kind of a long explanation, but hopefully to answer the question, that you absolutely can have multiple plans. You can have multiple plans within a group, and then as you start to create separate teams, which in fact are creating separate Microsoft 365 groups, then you can have separate plans there as well. Okay.
We have one more question. You want to take it now, or you want to jump into your
Sure.
next piece? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a way to set a plan with buckets and tasks as a template for doing multiple jobs that are similar in workload?
You can, with some caveats. And the caveat today is that you don't actually set up a quote unquote template that is then just create a new plan from the template. So let me show you. I bounced back out to the Planner Hub. So if I go create new plan, you might think, wouldn't it be great if in this dialog I could choose a template and say I want to create my new plan from that template. Today, it doesn't work that way. Today, what you have to do is you take an existing plan. Let's take this one, for example, the product launch event, and you create buckets, and you could even create tasks in the buckets and a number of other things that you want to configure. Then you have to do this non-intuitive thing. You have to choose this option up here at the top. So I'm up at the top where I've got these various tabs that I also want to show you guys here in a sec. But this option here, which is more, in this more option, you have an option now that says copy plan. So when you choose copy plan, now you're effectively able to create an exact copy of this plan with some options here. Well, actually, there are some things I should say that copy, and there are some things that don't copy. And again, I would have to go back out to the web and refresh my memory on what things exactly do copy and which things don't copy from a plan. But this is effectively the way that you would set up a quote unquote template so that you could then reuse it for something that's going to be similarly used in the future. The caveat, though, that I certainly want to call out, and it's a limitation I think that Microsoft is looking into, is today the only way that you can copy plans is as long as it's contained within the same Microsoft 365 group. And so there's a big discussion around that in user voice. Lots of people, I think, that are stating that that's not really useful for them, quite frankly, because in many cases you want to be able to have a plan that crosses over various Microsoft 365 groups or various teams. And again, today this copy plan capability is compartmentalized in that you can only copy it within an existing Microsoft 365 group. But hopefully that maybe that helps at least a little, give you some options of some things to do as far as plan templates. Okay.
And just to clarify a smidge more, when he says within that Microsoft 365 group, basically within the team you're already in. So I couldn't take it and put it out to multiple teams.
That's
Hashtag
exactly right.
annoying, but we're confident it'll get better.
Yep, exactly. Like I said, I'm pretty certain that that is something that Microsoft engineering is certainly looking at. But there are probably a number of considerations that are involved in being able to have planners, plans that are copied across different teams and Microsoft 365 groups. Okay, so
for the user voice for that, and if I can find it, I'm going to put it in the chat for everybody.
That would be really helpful. Yep, thanks, Joy. Yep, I think again, user voice is an extremely useful utility for everyone to be able to go in and voice your opinions about capabilities or what's working well. More often it's the things that aren't working well in the product in terms of your perspective. but then to be able to go in and find that someone else has already put that in as a suggestion and then just start to vote it. You can vote things up. And again, the various engineering teams at Microsoft really do pay attention, and they really do provide comments and updates on those user voice items to try to help you understand that they're listening, they're paying attention to your feedback. Okay, so moving on a little bit further into just kind of what's possible here in terms of Planner. Again, I'm back in the browser, so on the Planner hub. Inside of this particular plan here, again, we looked at the fact that you can create these different buckets. We looked at the fact that you can create tasks relatively easily, or you can click on any of these tasks and get to some additional detail about the tasks. One thing that I also neglected to mention in each of the tasks is there is this notion of what are called labels. Labels are these things right here along the side that, again, you can kind of think of these as, these little sticky labels that you might put in terms of marking pages of where you are in a book or something like that. Today, you have 6 labels. They're color-coded in this way that are by default available per plan. And those 6 labels are customizable. So in this case, for this particular project, they just created labels across these 5 and left this last one purple, empty in this case. But the idea behind this is that you can then tag or label any of these tasks that then can cross over the various buckets. So again, those of you that come from the SharePoint space, that's near and dear to Joy and my heart, know that looking at metadata as a way to identify and categorize content has a number of different uses, but one of the biggest uses is that you can then think about content in more than one way rather than just store it inside of a folder. So again, if you think about these different buckets as folders where these tasks are kind of tucked away inside the folder, the labels allow you to then be able to pivot on that and see a grouping of these tasks in a different way simply by applying the labels. Okay, and as you can see here, you can apply more than one label to a task too. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to show is that once you've got this view in front of you here, you've got some really useful filters and groupings that you can change this to in order to be able to, again, further refine what you're looking at and kind of more quickly be able to assess what's the status and what's kind of going on in terms of this particular plan. So the filter option up here, number 1, again, really useful in that you've got a number of different filter options that you can filter by. Maybe I just want to see only the really, really urgent ones. So if I select this option here, again, clearly now my entire board has now just minimized down just to these 2 tasks that are marked as urgent and have this little, bell that's ringing on them, or I should say, the bell here is the reminder, I should say, but giving you some indicators that these are important. You can clear those filters here in this case. You can do any number of other things again. Maybe I just want to see whatever that's related to marketing collateral. So again, I can see that in this case, even though these are multiple labels, it's just going to whittle them down. So filtering is a great way to be able to come in and again, get an easier view as to what's going on in terms of a plan. But then you also have some very standard out-of-the-box groupings of these various buckets, or groupings of these various tasks, I should say. And I think this is a really useful way, especially again, like in a regular stand-up meeting that you have with your team, to quickly assess what's happening. So again, the default is grouped by the buckets that you've created. But the second one here is you can change to the assignments. So again, I think this is really cool because, for example, here, I'm just kind of scrolling from left to right. You can see that one of these is unassigned. So the call for POC checklist review. Actually, if you remember, that's the one that we promoted from a checklist subtask into its own task in this case. But the ability to say, okay, this is unassigned. I want to assign this to someone relatively quickly. Well, sure, I could click on this task and go over here and click assign and then drill through this list or what have you. I could do that, but there's a much slicker way to do that in this view. I can simply grab this card and drag it and drop it around into any of these various columns, the buckets here. And let's say I want to assign it to Alex Wilbert, just drop and let it go. And so as you can see here, by simply rearranging the tasks from this group by assigned to view, you can quickly reassign tasks from one person to another just by dragging them around. You also have a group by progress. Again, going to be very common that we're going to want to get a chance to see what's in progress, clearly what has been completed, or if there are tasks that have not started yet and are maybe overdue, or any other indicators here in this case. So you can group by progress. You can group by due date. Again, another really useful view, because again, anything over here in this column that says late, probably going to want to spend some time kind of unpacking that a little bit and figure out what's the status, what's going on. You can also group by labels. I mentioned earlier that there's a benefit to labels, and kind of here's an example of that. You can now take all of those tasks that were bucketed originally by, are they on track, are they blocked, are they at risk? And now you just sort of spun them around to look at them in a different way, in this case here, okay? Notice that in this case, keynote presentation, even though some of these are multiple tagged, it's going to show you, and I'm not entirely sure now that I look at this here, like how did it choose to put that in this bucket based on the fact that it's also got marketing collateral? Oh, actually it's duplicating it in this case. So it is showing that event webcast here is labeled with marketing collateral, and event webcast is actually here as well because it's labeled under event planning. So again, just know that when you come into this labeled view, if you've selected multiple labels in this case, you may potentially see the same task across different labels, but again, that's by design. And then the last one here, again, obvious one, by priority. Okay, so anything that you might see over here that's urgent, also again, something really to highlight in your stand-up. So again, any of these are also very easy to drag and rearrange around in this case. So, you know, maybe this is no longer very important, it's actually low, I just want to move it over here. And so again, this applies to any one of these, You can very easily drag these around and say, you know, this is late, or this has no date, this one's scheduled for this week, and just drag that and drop that in there, okay? And it automatically applies the appropriate properties or metadata in that case. So again, filtering and grouping, really cool views that you can switch to that are up here in the upper right-hand corner. And then kind of bringing it all full circle here at this point, none of these tools would be really useful if we didn't have some simplified way to visualize kind of the bigger picture. So again, you've got these 3 tabs across the top we mentioned a minute ago. Board is the primary one. The second one in the middle is this one called charts. And charts, again, very simplified. You know, again, this one you saw when we were on the Planner Hub originally, just kind of giving an overall status. But this is specific to this plan in this case. So you've got 13 tasks that are left, 9 that are not started, 2 in progress, 2 that are late, et cetera, et cetera. You can see various tasks in the various buckets, and when you hover over them, you know, it gives you some different indications about them that are in progress and not started and so forth. Priority, and then this one down here, which again is a different way of looking at who's assigned to what, and is this person, Lee Gu in this case, is he just overloaded because again, everybody else has got a reasonable amount of tasks, but Lee has got quite a few on his plate in this case. So you could do a couple of things. You could certainly drag things around here in this task view on the right-hand side. I found that to be a little bit clunky for my experience of trying to drag and dropping up and down. But again, if you come into here, you could then very easily go back and say, I want to group this by to whom it's assigned. And when it's assigned, in this case here, you can now say, okay, great, I want to take this task and move it from Lee, drag it up here, reassign it to Alex. I want to take this task, drag it from Lee, go all the way up here now, and see, this is what I mean by clunky, how it kind of goes slow. But I want it to go and assign it to Megan. But as you can see, you know, in real time, this is adjusting in this case here because the fact that it's reassigning these tasks here. I'll just drag one to Lydia, and you'll see this switch. So again, this is really cool, right? Something that's really useful for teams to be able to quickly, on a regular basis, make some simple updates just by drag and drop. And then lastly here,
and I just got
next chart
that I've been assigned a new task.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, there
just
you go.
Fast.
Yeah, so the email notification that Lydia, who is actually Joy in this demonstration, got that email notification that indicated that she got a new task assigned to her. That came through that email notification relatively quickly. And then lastly up here, boards, charts, the schedule view, or the schedule tab in this case, is exactly what that sounds like. It is this calendar view, which as of today, you can see it in 2 different pivots, either week to week or month to month. And this is entirely driven by both the start and the due dates that have been assigned to tasks. So again, interestingly enough, you know, those are optional on tasks. When you go and you create a new task in a bucket, it's optional to set the due date and optional to set the start date. But really, again, most teams are wanting to ensure that there's some accountability driven on a timeline So they're going to set either one or both of those on a task. And then when you do so, that data then is reflected here in this view for the schedule. You can actually take this schedule and add it or link it, if you will, to your personal Outlook so that you can then see this schedule side by side with your Outlook schedule. And the way that you do that is, again, this ... here, which gives you more options. There's a bunch of other things that you could look at here as well. There's an option right here at the bottom that says add plan to Outlook calendar. When you do that, it's basically going to publish this, if you will, and give you the ability to say there's an iLink here in this case, iLink to this calendar, and you're just going to say add to Outlook. So when you click on add to Outlook here, effectively what it's going to do, in this case, it's doing this inside the context of a web browser. But again, if you've got your mail and calendar in Office 365 with Exchange Online, all of that is tied together in the cloud, and it gives you this ability to do that. So you can say, subscribe and so forth. I'm actually going to discard this here in this case, but just know that you do have the ability to be able to pull in a planner view of a project and then be able to see it either overlapping or side by side with your own calendar and Outlook, amongst other team calendars as well. Okay. All right. So any other questions that popped in just yet?
Yes. Joy, did you see the question with the, so 6 labels max, 3 status max, can't copy plans between 365's groups, only can't edit comments, only delete?
Let me look at the comments.
Yes. And then how determine name of buckets? Usually by their status, but since only 3 statuses, how do you decide? I feel like there's a disconnect.
Yeah, so I might have misunderstood that last part of the question, but if the question is centered around how do you, per plan, how do you determine the bucket names in this case? Again, really, the bucket names are going to be entirely customizable or decided by the team in terms of what's meaningful for that particular plan. So, for example, here I've got a different event plan that they created buckets for tasks in order to complete the presentation, tasks that are specific to the press in preparation for this event, tasks that are specific to the venue, tasks that are specific to team travel, et cetera, et cetera. If I went into, say, an IT plan, this one is actually a dated example because they, in fact, created buckets that were priority. And this in my demo is actually from prior to when Microsoft released and included that priority flag option in a task. So prior to having, I'll click on this here, you'll see that it would be redundant and actually not consistent here in having a high priority bucket task with a medium priority indicator here. So again, this was in the demo, this was something that I've had for quite some time. This was something that was done before Microsoft included that feature. But let me give you another example here. Completed or backlogged as bucket names, or in Patty F's logistics, Patty's travel, press interviews, location. So again, you really, the buckets can be anything that you want, and that there's no direct relationship per se to the priority. That's a completely separate flag or a completely separate property that you would assign to tasks. So I know there was more parts to that question.
It's the second part that I think that you were a little just confused and not 100% on was how it says how determine name of buckets, usually status, but since only 3 status, how do you decide?
Is the question the naming of the buckets as related to status? Is that the question? I think again, unless I'm misunderstanding, and I apologize in advance if I am, they're not related in any way. So you can create a task that will have a progress, in this case, to say it's started or in progress or completed. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago too, there's also a separate property here to allow you to determine a priority. And again, this is whatever you're assigning to it. The bucket names themselves can be completely different than either of those. There is no relationship between them. So again, the buckets are just going to be, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could choose to view your task by priority, and that on the board would kind of make it look like buckets. I mean, so that's an option, but pretty much think of your bucket names as, okay, these are the things we've got to do. If we were going to organize those, how would we organize it?
Exactly.
If you're doing an event, would you have catering? Would you have presentations? Would you have speakers? Would you have a seating chart? You know, and then you could put those associated tasks into those buckets.
Yeah, exactly. So again, not sure if we really answered and or addressed some of the things that were being asked in that question. But again, you know, please do connect with us. We'll make sure that we throw up our contact information, a number of different ways that you can get in touch with us after the webinar. And let's continue making sure that we can address what you're asking about, because we want to be clear about that.
Absolutely. And we have a really nice segue into next week with this next question. Any integration between Planner and To Do, as in import or export tasks?
Yeah, so I will tell you this, and then I will encourage you, if you would, to please come to the webinar next Tuesday as well too, where we're going to dive deep into Microsoft To Do. There is one fairly simple integration today between Planner and To Do that allows tasks that have been assigned to you in Planner to show up in a special list inside of To Do that, coincidentally enough, is called Assigned to Me. So that particular ability really allows you to keep your focus on your personal tasks, but still have visibility into your team tasks, again, specifically in that case, to ones that are assigned to you. That's really the primary integration between the two at the moment. There isn't really, for my awareness, there isn't really a sort of export Planner tasks, import them into To Do, nothing like that. But again, keep your ears open, because when the Teams tasks app, the one that is going to be capable of pulling together personal to-do tasks and team-based Planner tasks into a single view inside Microsoft Teams, that I think is really going to change the whole game there in terms of your ability to keep track of what's going on across both personal items as well as team items. So keep your ears open on that. We certainly are, and we'll let you know whenever we see that as well. The last thing I did want to show here, just for the sake of doing so, you know, again, none of these ways of talking about these services would be complete if we didn't really talk about the fact that there's mobile capabilities across these as well. So let me just briefly, with the time we have left, bring up my mobile device, which is an iPhone in my case, and show that, in fact, you can get to the same type of information, same views of data from mobile. So in this case, again, I've got an iPhone. If you got an Android phone, just know that there is a Planner app for both of these platforms. I've got a number of different apps on my iPhone, a number of personal ones. This second screen in the kind of the swipe left, swipe right paradigm is the one that I tend to call my work screen. It's got a number of different Office 365 apps and other apps that we at Pay Group use to just keep on top of work. And one of these in the list, as you can see right here, is Planner. And so when I click on Planner, again, right now I'm logged in actually as this demo user again, Megan. So some of these here you should see are very familiar to you. Event plan and the product launch event and mark a project plan, et cetera. So this is the Planner Hub view, being able to see all of the favorite plans, et cetera. If I clicked right here into product launch event, I could go directly into this plan. And by simply scrolling left and scrolling right, again, you'll see it's really, if not identical to that type of information that you would see in the Planner view in the browser, just optimized for being able to display on a small screen. So in this case here, I can see all the different buckets. If I clicked here, I'll just click on this top item here, finalize product imagery for Keynote. It brings up a much more detailed view where I can interact with this here. I can actually go in and change, you know, the priority of this to be important. I can add attachments and so forth. I can add different labels. Maybe I want to change it from Keynote to marketing collateral, whatever it may be. I can interact with that here really straightforward and easy. You also can kind of hold and drag these items around. So you notice here, just like I was showing you before, you can drag these from bucket to bucket here inside the Planner app on your mobile device. And then up here at the top, you've got a couple of really useful options here. This one here on the right of the label of the plan is the group by. So again, we saw all these different group by buckets before, or sorry, group by views. You can say group by bucket, group by assigned to. So now it's going to flip and show me the tasks grouped by to whom it's assigned, and so on and so forth. So again, just like you saw before, now I want to change it to progress. So again, really useful in terms of being able to see this here on the go. And then this other one here, if you kind of figured it out already, this is the charts view. So I click on that and it takes me directly to these various charts, which again, most of you saw from the browser view earlier, which allows me to also interact with these relatively easily. I can click on these, it takes me to some more detail. I can kind of filter these in to see, in progress, and so on and so forth. So a really useful tool to have in your pocket on the go when, again, something you need to be able to do is view and keep track of tasks that are going on with your team. Okay, so that's really about it, I think, at this point here, folks. I'm going to go ahead and flip back over to this last slide, which is really, again, just to say thanks for joining. And on the right-hand side there, you can see our contact information. You've got our Twitter handles. We're fairly active on Twitter, so feel free to tweet at us. And you've also got our email addresses there. Those QR codes actually will take you directly to our LinkedIn profile. So please feel free to connect with us. We would love to connect with you. And Stacy or Joy, again, you guys want to make any mention in addition to the next webinar or anything else coming up in the series?
Oh, I put the link in order to be able to access registering for To Do, which is next week, right in the Q&A. Some people started having questions about To Do, so it sounds like everybody's pretty interested. One question is To Do in Outlook or a separate app. So all those things will be addressed and more.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to that.
And you'll see, Christine, on that, I'll give you just a sneak peek now. You get a lot of visibility, so it kind of doesn't matter where you go, you're going to be able to see a lot of the same stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I know we're all eager because we are constantly keeping track of things that we're doing, working with multiple customers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all eager for this new kind of one tasks app to rule them all to come into Teams here in the coming months, I believe it is. So, again, as a avid user of To Do and a big fan of Planner, it's going to be a really welcome addition.
Yep, absolutely. And we're looking forward to it. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you back with us in a week as we jump in To Do. We're going to do some To Do. It's going to be
Can't wait.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for all the questions, the comments. We appreciate you all joining in and being with us today. And beware, Revenge of the 5th.
That's right.
It's a
Stay
promise.
safe. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.